Eugene, excuse me. He got what he deserved. I don't feel sorry for you, Ben Sprecher. Hello everybody, how are you? I hope that you're very, very well. I've not done a video like this in a really long time. Some of my most popular videos on this channel are about Broadway scandals, and I have come across... It has to be the biggest Broadway scandal, like, ever. And I don't understand why there's not more information about this. I mean, there's lots of articles and things, but I've not found a video on it. So I thought that I would talk today about Rebecca the musical and its dramatic journey to Broadway. Honestly, you couldn't write this story. Couldn't make it up. If you don't know me, by the way, my name's Amy. I make a lot of theatre content on YouTube, so if you want to subscribe, then please do. So I'll leave a link to my previous scandal videos down below where I talk about Harvey Weinstein pissing off the Tony Awards committee, Jeremy Jordan and The Greatest Showman, and much, much more. I actually had intended to do this video as like 5 different scandals and include it all in one, but when I started like doing the serious deep researching on Rebecca, I was like, no, this needs its own video because it's just mind-blowing. I will also leave a link to all of my resources down below if you want to do any more kind of research, but I think this is going to be a pretty in-depth look at Rebecca the musical. So this is the story of Rebecca the musical from 2012, based on the very famous book. It's been made into various films. It was made into a Netflix film last year with Lily James. So this was a $12 million show that never made it to Broadway, even though it had over $1 million in advance ticket sales. It's a story that people love and people know. So what happened? It never made it to Broadway after it was discovered that the investors of the show were in fact not real, and the FBI had to get involved. So the musical was actually based off the 2006 German language production of Rebecca. Basically these two producers, Ben Sprecher and Louise Forlenza. So Louise saw the show in Austria. She called Ben and was like, you have to come and see this musical. I think it's going to be massive. Ben goes over and he's like, this show has to make it to Broadway. This is the next Phantom of the Opera and I'm going to make it happen. So before it actually made it to Broadway, they wanted to do a tryout in London. So in the production, there's this grand staircase that apparently is like set on fire and crashes to the ground. And so what they would need is the mechanics underneath the stage for the staircase to come in and out from below the stage. So they went to the Shaftesbury Theatre in London and did an excavation project to see if they would be able to make room for the staircase. And apparently, whilst doing the excavation, they hit water from the River Thames and flooded the basement of the Shaftesbury Theatre. If that shouldn't have been an omen to say, you know, we shouldn't move forward, I don't know what is, but flooding a theatre in London is the least of what happened in this show. So after they flooded the theatre, they decided to scrap the staircase idea and just try it on Broadway. Because after this setback, they were like, a setback. What would be the next step? Clearly Broadway. Ben Sprecher is basically really struggling to find investors for this show. And there's a few reasons to that. One, this was all around kind of late 2009 to 2012. It was right after the stock market crash. It was around the recession. There wasn't a lot of money around. Also, Rebecca was a fully sung through musical, which apparently doesn't go down very well with American audiences. And also Ben Sprecher, who was kind of the lead producer, he was doing it with Louise Forlenza, but he was kind of the main one. He was pretty well known in the off-Broadway theatre producing community, but he hadn't done a big project on Broadway yet. So this was going to be his big one, and he didn't really have those investors that he could kind of grab onto, so he was kind of scrapping around to find somebody. He had originally a 7-figure investor who decided to scale back his investment from like in the millions to like 500,000, which you think that's a lot of money, but in making a Broadway show, it's a little drop in the ocean. So they were sitting at about $6 million of investments that they'd kind of secured, but the production needed at least 12 million. So Ben found a stockbroker called Mark Houghton, who says that he has these investors, 3 investors, and he offers up a pretty sizable amount of the capital needed. So Mark had, as I say, these 3 investors that Ben Sprecher had never met, but Mark was this big stockbroker. Little did they know that a year prior, Mark Houghton had actually had to file for bankruptcy because he had $15 million worth of debt. Not really somebody that you want to be going into business with who purports to have a lot of investments. Something I am kind of obsessed with. Mark Houghton had also been done for fraud previously for stealing money from people and used that money to buy himself a 50-foot yacht that he called Hot Catch. Just brilliant. You just can't make this shit up. But honestly, it gets so much better. So back to Rebecca and these investors. So Ben had basically told Mark Houghton that he would receive basically like a payout for the investors that he brought onto the project. So even though he wasn't putting in money himself because he'd kind of brokered the deal, then he was going to make some money. So in the coming months, while they were waiting for these investors to kind of sign over the money, Mark Houghton asked for $60,000 from Ben and Louise on the project, and it wasn't payment, but it was like an advance on the money that he was going to be making in the production. One of the things in that $60,000 was $18,000 so that Mark Houghton could go to South Africa on a safari so that he could get one of the investors to sign a form. It's like you couldn't take him out for lunch, you had to go on a safari with him. And Ben Sprecker's over there like, yeah, that seems reasonable. Ben, hon, really? Use your noggin. So the production had originally been due to start in March of 2012, but obviously after that first investor scaled back their investment, they pushed the show back to September. So around July time, Ben Sprecher was like, listen, we haven't got this money from these investors. Mark, what can you do? You need to help us. We need this money. Because the biggest investor, who was this South African guy, hadn't released any funds yet. So Ben Sprecher's like, we're starting rehearsals in like 2 or 3 months, we need the money. Then the team hear that this investor from South Africa, Paul Abrams, was in fact in the ICU with malaria. This investor who's going to invest like $4.5 million is in hospital, and they're like, what are we going to do? Then they hear that he's in fact died of malaria. So Ben Sprecher is on the phone to the executor of Paul Abrams' will saying, listen, he's invested this money, you need to release it. We need to like speed up the process of probate, and you're giving me the money. So the show is postponed. The New York Times puts out a press release about the show losing a massive investor. So then Ben Sprecher receives contact by Larry Runsdorf, who is an investor, and says, I'm so sorry about what happened to your show. I'd love to invest. I'd love to help you out. Sounds like a great project. However, I don't want to be involved publicly. I want to be like a silent investor. So I want anonymity in press releases and everything. So they agree. Larry says that he is offering to replace the dead guy. Nice. And cover about $2 million in investment capital. Then the Rebecca team send out another press release via their publicist to say that the show is good to go and they're back on track and they're going to be starting rehearsals in October of 2012. In the meantime, Mark Houghton, the stockbroker, was trying to get a loan from the bank and was using his home, Forlenz's home, and Sprecher's home as collateral, because that doesn't seem dangerous. You could literally lose your home for this loan to make this musical. Craziness. So whilst they're all gearing up for rehearsals to start in October, a journalist for the New York Times, Patrick Healy, starts doing some investigating because he thinks something here seems a bit dodgy. Patrick Healy starts doing some investigating into who Mark Houghton is, who Paul Abrams, the dead guy with malaria, is, but Healy couldn't find anything about Paul Abrams, this guy who died of malaria, who was apparently also like this mega rich investor, which seems pretty odd. And he wasn't able to find a website for his company, he wasn't able to find an obituary, and then the New York Times posts a front page article about Rebecca and with the concerns that something isn't quite right and that this is looking like a bit of a scam. The executor of Paul Abrams' will was a man called Mr. Wexler, that's all they had, and they had an email address. So Patrick Healy from The Times had tried to find some more information about the executor of Paul Abrams' will and found that the email address had only been created 1 month prior to him looking, which was around the time that Paul Abrams died. Apparently during this time, Ben Sprecher had been having some doubts about the whole Mark Houghton thing, if he could trust him, but he was like, do you know what, we'll deal with it at some other time. I've got so much on my plate right now. I'm trying to get this show up and running. I just need to be plowing forward, head down, keep working. Now listen, I'm sorry, but at this point I'm looking at it and I'm like, Ben Sprecher, you like low-key deserve to be scammed when there are this many red flags and you're just like, it's fine. Mark Houghton seems like a great guy. I think you shouldn't be successful in business if you're this bad at business. I mean, he should have just bloody well Googled Mark Houghton, because it's very easily Googleable that he had been involved with fraud and everything previously. It's just ridiculous, but it gets better. So now we're at the Wednesday before the Monday start of rehearsals on the 1st of October. So it's like the last week of September, and Ben Sprecher is in his office when 2 FBI agents come in asking some questions about Paul Abrams, the dead malaria guy. The FBI believed that Paul Abrams had been made up, and they believed that Ben Sprecher was in on making up this person as well. In the meantime, Larry Runsdorf, the guy who was going to invest the $2 million, had sent over all of his forms, all of his paperwork to say, yep, we're good to go ahead with my $2 million investment. Now that same week, Larry Runsdorf's lawyers received 2 emails from Bethany Walsh, who was an anonymous person they didn't know, and Bethany had basically emailed them saying, listen, there is something dodgy going on with this production, get out while you can. There was some real questions about who this Bethany Walsh was, because obviously, as I said earlier, Larry Runsdorf had said that he would invest on the project, but only if he could keep anonymity. And obviously this random person suddenly knew who Larry Runsdorf was and knew his lawyer's emails to give him a warning about the production. So even with muddling investors, these emails from Bethany, the FBI, the article in the Times, rehearsals were still due to start on the Monday. I feel so sorry for the people who were involved in this production. The actors, the creative team, the front of house, everybody who lost a job because of what happened on this show. Apart from our very own Scandals bad boy, James Barber, who was in a previous one of my Scandals videos, who had been charged with assault on a minor when he was backstage at a show as a leading man on Broadway. I'm pretty glad this happened to him. If you want to know more about that, as I say, I'll leave a link to the previous video down below. So when I say I feel sorry for the actors in this production, please know that I don't mean James Barber. But the cast was still so excited to finally get into the rehearsal room on 42nd Street, get ready, get rehearsing, and get this show to Broadway. They've been pulled along since March, earlier on that year, and for some people probably earlier on as well. And then on the Friday, before the Monday start of rehearsals, in comes Sarah Finkelstein. I mean, what a name. So it's the Friday, Ben and Louise are off trying to go and get some paperwork for something, and Sarah Finkelstein has sent an email that morning directly to Larry Runsdorf. And this came from Sarah, who, like Bethany Walsh, was unknown, completely anonymous basically, other than this name and this Gmail account. It said, the walls are about to cave in on Mr. Sprecher and the Rebecca Broadway production. It's a near certainty that the man Paul Abrams was made up several months ago to defraud other investors as a placeholder to give them a sense of security, as well as the owners of the theatre, the Schuberts, while Mr. Sprecher continued to try and raise money. When the money wasn't raised by August, Mr. Sprecher or someone associated with him came up with the story that Paul Abrams had died. Mr. Sprecher hadn't been able to come up with any information to prove that Paul Abrams was a real person. In fact, any information he has provided has proven to be extremely suspicious. It is inevitable that the truth will come out in a matter of days or weeks that the Paul Abrams story was definitively made up, and at that point there will be charges of fraud, lawsuits, etc. The email went on a little bit more, concluding with a warning from Finkelstein that the only reason that Runsdorf would really want to invest in Rebecca would be as a tax write-off or to get caught up in a fraud trial. And at that email, Larry Runsdorf, angel investor with $2.25 million, pulls out his investment the Friday before rehearsals. So as I say, Ben and Louise were on their way to go and get some paperwork. They pulled off at the side of the road to read the email. Ben Sprecher was stood outside a McDonald's sobbing in the rain. I mean, honestly, a mood, but... So the next day, Sprecher had this meeting already planned with the FBI to discuss when they came in earlier on in the week to ask questions. So Ben Sprecher decided to call a breakfast meeting with his lawyer, a private investigator, and Mark Houghton to kind of get a lay of the land, find out what's happening. So they go for breakfast, and Mark Houghton is bragging about all of these investors, how they used to go out to fancy hotels and restaurants in London, and generally just being a bit of an ass. And at the end of that breakfast meeting, the private investigator that Ben Sprecher had got for the meeting said he knew basically the minute he met him that he couldn't be trusted and that he was dodgy. And it was then, at this point, that Ben Sprecher was like, maybe I can't trust Mark Houghton. You don't say, Benny boy! I mean, really? It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. But honestly, it even gets better than this. So this is on the Saturday, and then Ben Sprecher has his hours-long meeting with the FBI, going over everything, being asked questions. He comes out of his meeting, and he gets an email from his publicist, Mark Thibodeau, saying, listen, I'm sorry. I can't work on this anymore. I'm pulling out of being your publicist. This is embarrassing. A good day for Ben all around, I'd say. It's clearly going great for Ben. So then on Sunday, the day before the rehearsals, some of the actors and the producers all go in to the studios to be told that the show is cancelled or postponed, and they will not in fact be starting rehearsals the next day. Now Ben Sprecher, completely broken with knowing what to do, contacts his publicist Mark Thibodeau and basically begs him and says, please just write me at least one final press release. I don't know what I'm doing. You have the connections. You know what you're doing. Please just send out one last press release. Mark Thibodeau does that but says, I will do it, but as long as it's not sent out on my company's headed paper. I'll write it for you as a friend, but I don't want to be involved other than that. The cast actually still decided to go into the rehearsal studio on the first Monday of October to go in and just kind of commiserate with each other over a lost job, over being tied to such a dramatic and controversial production, and generally just kind of be like, what a shit show. In the following weeks, it did come out that yes, Mark Houghton had in fact invented all three of his investors. He had come up with Paul Abrams, who was not real, who didn't die of malaria. He'd come up with Mr. Wexler, the executor. It was all him just making people up, making up all this money. I do want to know if he ever actually did go on the safari. Could you imagine if he was like, I've got to go on this safari, and actually went on a safari but just on his own? So Mark Houghton was eventually arrested for money laundering and fraud and all this, making it all up basically. Ben Sprecher and Louise Folenza then decided to try to sue Mark Houghton, which I understand, you're really pissed off, you've lost loads of money, but they tried to sue him for $100 million. It's quite clear that Mark Houghton doesn't have 2 pennies to rub together. You're not gonna get that money. Why would you go into this legal pursuit with him? They're just bad business people, surely. But here's my favourite part of the story. So you might remember Bethany Walsh and Sarah Finkelstein, the people who contacted Larry Runsdorf to warn him of the issues with the production. Now, the FBI and everybody was investigating what had happened, and they found out that the IP addresses for Bethany Walsh and Sarah Finkelstein matched. It was the same person who had warned the lawyers and then warned Larry that day that finally made him pull out. But the email addresses were traced to Mark Thibodeau, the publicist. Dun dun dun! When I read that, I literally was like, I wasn't ready. The guy who had finally quit on the Saturday, but was so nice that he still went and wrote one final press release on the Sunday. Like, I'm sorry, but this twist just got me. It just got me. So I did read basically like an interview with Mark Thibodeau where he was talking about what had happened. And he said that he had been working in the Broadway community for years, was a well-renowned publicist, and he was thinking, I'm just basically flushing my career and all of my credibility down the toilet being involved in this production, and it's not fair. And he felt sorry for Larry Runsdorf, and he said that he had brought up concerns with Mark Houghton and these investors with Ben Sprecher multiple times, and Ben Sprecher had just kind of said, it's fine, we'll sort it out another time, let's just keep working on the project. And he felt that he had like a moral obligation to tell Larry Runsdorf what was happening and that he was going to lose all of his money. Another thing that had been a concern for Mark Thibodeau was that basically when they sent out the press release to say that Paul Abrams had died of malaria and the show was postponed, he had said, can I have some information about Paul Abrams to put in the press release? And Ben Sprecher had said, no, keep it anonymous, we don't want the information to be out to the public. Why? Because he wasn't real. And 2 days actually before Patrick Healy of the New York Times did the big article basically saying that he was suspecting that there was some fraud going on, Mark Thibodeau had been doing his own research on Mark Houghton and the contracts and things. And as a publicist, this really isn't his job, but he was clearly like, something's not right here. He had found that there were multiple name misspellings in the contracts. He'd found that there was like a fake address for a company that was supposed to be an investment company. And he'd done some searching about Mark Houghton and had found that there was a person called Houghton who lived in Long Island who had been done for fraud previously. And this is what I'm saying. You're telling me that you're gonna trust this person who you don't know with all this money and you're not gonna do a quick Google search? I talked to someone on Tinder for a day and I do a Google search. Come on. When Mark Thibodeau had basically raised these concerns about Mark Houghton to Ben Sprecher, Ben had basically been like, you know, he's a stockbroker. Stockbrokers deal with a lot of private investors. There's a lot of money going around. Sometimes things look wrong online. Not all the information's out there. And was basically just brushing it off again and again and again. I bet he wish he hadn't now. So Mark Thibodeau was clearly pretty torn up about what was happening morally and called Ben and basically was like, listen, I feel really uncomfortable with what's going on. And Ben Sprecher was basically like, listen, stop worrying about it. Let's just focus on getting into rehearsals, then we'll sort it out later. So I do think that Mark Thibodeau basically did everything that he felt he could to raise concerns and to try and nip it in the bud as early as possible. But Ben Sprecher was having none of it. Thibodeau said that he also was very aware that the press release that Larry Runsdorf had seen that made him want to get involved in the project was one that he'd sent out, and he felt like he was part of this scam and he felt uncomfortable with it. So he decided to do what he had to do. So he sent these 2 emails as Bethany Walsh, sent them to the lawyers. He said that if he had received a reply that he wouldn't have gone ahead and made up Sarah Finkelstein, but he hadn't received a reply and was like, this guy is gonna lose his money. I'm not being taken seriously. I need to sort this out. Then that Friday morning, Mark Thibodeau, completely torn up with guilt, anxiety and stress, decided to send the email as Sarah Finkelstein to Larry Runsdorf. So some people said, like, why didn't he just drop out earlier if he was having all of these concerns? And he said that he didn't feel like it was fair on Larry Runsdorf to just drop out. And I really respect that. And I mean, it does need to be said that I found all of this information from articles online. They do seem like really credible sources, but I would still say there will be people who potentially will see this video who have some kind of connection to it and will know things that I could possibly never know. So I've done the best with the information that I have, and it's difficult to judge anybody's specific choices that they made whilst being involved in this drama. But I personally, I feel like I have a lot of respect for Mark Thibodeau and what he did. So after all of this, and after Ben Sprecher had found out that Mark Thibodeau had sent these emails, he was then sued also by Ben Sprecher and Louise Folenza. I'm sorry, but why do these people love suing people so much? It's like, move on. But apparently they sued him for basically trying to like sabotage the production and wanting it to fail. And in the suit, they tried to sue Mark Thibodeau and 3 other people who were like John and Jane Does. So they're people basically who aren't named publicly in a suit. So this led a lot of conspiracy about if it was true that Mark Thibodeau had been trying to sabotage the production and who else was with him, who was John and Jane Doe. People were saying, is it Andrew Lloyd Webber, who Mark had previously worked with, because obviously they said that Rebecca was the new Phantom of the Opera, and maybe it was Andrew Lloyd Webber. Some people said it was Cameron Mackintosh, and Mark said that this is the thing that annoyed him the most. It wasn't even that they were suing him, but it was the fact that there was casting like a shadow over his integrity and basically saying that he was involving other people and other producers in the industry and bringing all of these other people into it unnecessarily. It's like, Ben, it's already going pretty bad. Stop digging that grave, hun. Move on. But Thibodeau did say that he acted alone in sending the 3 emails from Bethany and Sarah. So Ben Sprecher did say that he was still wanting to someday get Rebecca to Broadway. In 2017, he finally lost the English rights for the production, and I don't think it will ever make it to Broadway. I did have a listen to some of the songs, and I'll be honest, quite catchy. You might be thinking, oh, poor old Ben, he was just trying to make a show happen. He was just a boy with a dream about Rebecca the Musical getting to Broadway. Well, our friend Benny Boy didn't ever get charged with anything himself to do with Rebecca, but in 2019, Ben Sprecher was charged with downloading and possessing child pornography. So really, I can't feel sorry for the old bastard. He got what he deserved. I don't feel sorry for you, Ben Sprecher, or James Barber. I don't feel sorry for you, because anyone who does that to children deserves to rot. Okay, that is my video about Rebecca the Musical. Wasn't that such a good story? I'm obsessed with it. Did you know about this before? If you do know anything that I've said incorrectly, please let me know. I do my best to get all the information right, but obviously it's not always possible when I wasn't there. I didn't go on that safari with Mark Houghton. But if you have any other information, please let me know and I will pin it in a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed this video. As I say, let me know if you want more of these, because there is some wacky stuff that's happened on Broadway and I think it's quite interesting to talk about. So anyway, I hope you're all well. I hope you're looking after yourselves, looking after the ones you love, and I will see you soon. Love you lots. Bye.